Fair Play, a novel by Pete Fisher. Chapter 27. Bye Bye Blues. Blues Matters had been together now for more years than they cared to count. They were all beginning to feel like they'd been playing the same places in front of the same people for too long. The small pond had now become a touch too familiar. Playing the same songs in the same pubs, clubs and village halls to the same people had made the fun wear off. They decided to quit while they were winning, but go out with a bang. They put on a final farewell gig. The obvious venue was the village hall. Martin's buddy Mike manned the door. Mike sat at a small wooden table by the door where people came in. He was armed with a small metal cash box, 10 quid in change, and a rubber stamp embossed with the letters BM. He was charging a nominal entrance fee of £1. Any refugees would get the treatment. Mike would raise himself to his full 6 feet plus and lean over the table into the offender's face. "If you hain't got £1, my friend, then fuck off." Usually they relented and fished the money out sheepishly. Around 200 eager punters squeezed like proverbial sardines into the wooden hut that night. The village street was lined with cars all the way out to the main road. The pub was packed too. Most of the regular locals had to retreat and play backroom billiards. The R&B fans took over the public bar. Martin looked out over the crowd as he and the band took up position on that familiar little stage. The front rows were now mostly young teenagers. Some of them were kids of the band members, some of them the offspring of original fans. The set closed with a Chuck Berry classic. Martin had played it so many times. After tonight, he didn't want to have to sing it again, ever. Nevertheless, the whole hut seemed to be bouncing. People were jumping like crazy. Martin wondered if the wooden floorboards were in danger of collapsing under their combined weight. It was a suitably hot, smoky, high-energy gig. Blues Matters rattled the windows until midnight. Afterwards, in the sidebar tent, they kindly helped the landlord empty his last barrel of ale. Now it wouldn't be as heavy to carry. Beer and blues matter. Dublin, Saturday afternoon. The pedestrian shopping street was bustling with people, streaming in both directions. Most of them walked straight past Martin, as if he wasn't there. He was standing in front of an empty shop window. A poster on the door said "For rent or lease." Martin was busking on Grafton Street. He had his acoustic guitar strapped over his left shoulder and was doing his best to tune up. Martin had come over with a couple of George's musician mates in their dilapidated old VW hippie camper. They'd done a 3-week tour of the West Coast. Now they'd stopped off in the capital on the way back. Martin began by strumming a simple blues to test the waters. He only had a few covers up his sleeve. Pink Floyd's "Wish You Were Here" was always a good one at parties. Martin tried that first. He didn't have an amp to blast the shoppers with. He had to sing out good and loud and really whack the guitar to be heard above the bustle. Still, no one seemed to take any notice. Some up-tempo blues might do the trick. Martin retuned to a G chord. He could do some slide guitar. He hit the strings hard so that the guitar rang out and bounced off the shop windows opposite. A couple of people slowed down and turned their heads briefly. The first few coins plonked into the open guitar case at his feet. The chromed steel tube on his second finger glinted in the sun as he played. The haunting slide made people stop and listen. Soon he had a small crowd around him. A young mum with her small child picking its nose. A hippyish student couple in tie-dye. 2 old whiskered Irish guys in their Saturday best suits on the way to the pub. And a group of Japanese tourists with Nikons round their necks. A family loaded down with Tesco bags, their kids licking ice creams. A young man in his early 20s in t-shirt and jeans stopped right in front of him. His white t-shirt had U2 Achtung Baby in faded red script across it. Martin thought what a stupid album title it was. "How are you?" Martin smiled, blinked and nodded. He carried on playing. "'Bout you, mate." Martin nodded again. He couldn't talk and play at the same time. "That's a deadly bit of slide playing there. Your man Rory was a fierce fucking slide player, I'll tell ya." He meant Rory Gallagher, of course, one of Martin's all-time guitar heroes. "Would you be using a G-tune in there?" Martin felt it would be rude to ignore him. He stopped playing. "That's right, mate." "I'm Declan." "Hi, Declan. Martin." Martin put his guitar down in its case. He scooped up most of the change he'd collected, enough for a couple of beers. He rolled a cigarette. Declan was obviously very impressed with Martin's playing. "Good man yourself, fair play, you're sounding grand. Better than the bollocks you'll be hearing most days down this street." "Well, thanks, mate. My first time, actually." "So he's over here for the crack?" "That's right. And the girls." Declan laughed. "Stall it? Go for a pint?" Martin looked at his watch. It was still only just after midday. What the hell? Why not? Martin packed up his guitar and went along with Declan. The pub was just around the corner, a little way down the next side street. It was small, dark, and welcomingly cool inside. "So you on the Guinness?" Martin nodded. Declan ordered 2. They sat down at a table in the window and waited. Guinness can't be hurried. In the meantime, Declan began one of his stories. "Come here till I tell ya. Only last night I was telling your man Pat, if you stick to Guinness, you won't be feeling banjaxed in the morning." After the hangovers he'd already had in Ireland, Martin wasn't so sure. The barman brought the beer over and Declan held up his glass. "Slant ya!" Martin followed suit and sipped the Dublin nectar. Guinness did taste good. They used to say it was good for you. "Cheers. Nice to meet you, Declan." Martin realised his career as a busker was going to be short-lived. He listened to Declan's never-ending stories, wondering if he ever stopped talking. About an hour and 2 more pints of Guinness later, Martin felt it was time to go, before he got too wrecked to play. I really ought to be getting back, Declan." "Right you are, mate. I'm off now too." Declan had to see a man about a dog, or so he said. They walked back to the main street. On the corner, they bid each other farewell with a handshake. "Be seeing you there, Martin. It's been grand." "Yeah, look after yourself, Declan. Nice meeting you." Martin took up position again in front of the empty shop. This time a little unsteady on his feet, but fortified with Irish courage. A few people dropped coins into the case. After about an hour, Martin decided to call it a day. Back to the camper for a snooze. He'd just about covered the cost of his beer. He'd done something he'd always wanted to do. Martin cast his mind back to the folk club with Tom all those years ago. He remembered how nervous they'd been. He'd come a long way since then. Grafton Street had been a fair old session. Hey George, wie geht's? It's Martin. Ah, hi Martin. Everything good? I'm fine. Listen, George, I've been thinking about moving to Germany. I've decided I want to give it a try. That's great, Martin. The thing is, I need somewhere to stay. Do you think you could put me up for a while until I get my own place? Sure, if it's just for 1 or 2 months. I have a spare bedroom you could use. I don't pay rent, but maybe you just pay for your food. Of course! That's brilliant! Thank you! The plan was unfolding. Martin watched his little cottage disappear behind him. He took a long last look through the back window of Mike's car. The fields and hedges flashed by. They were driving along the bumpy main road to the city. The night before had been a hazy, wine-soaked evening. Mike had cooked chili, the last one Martin would enjoy for a while. Mike had pre-rolled several spliffs. They smoked 2 of them on the half-hour journey to the train station. They smoked the 3rd one in the station car park. A pall of blue smoke emerged as Martin opened the car door. He reeled a little when he took a lungful of the fresh spring air outside. He gave Mike a last hug. Mike got back in the car, the trace of a tear in his eye. But then he grinned out of the open window. Take care, my man. I will, Mike. Send you a postcard.